I'm John Hart, the co-founder of C3 Solutions, and welcome to another edition of Tech Voices. So today we're excited to be joined by Mr. Hugh Aljoe. Hugh is the Director of Producer Relations at the Noble Institute. He's a rancher, and today we're going to have a discussion about sustainability and some of the work that Hugh is up to. Hugh, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. Glad to be asked. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Well, I'm excited to kind of hear about the Noble Foundation and also your work. And so I think, before we jump into this, I think I was telling you that I'm sitting here in my barn. I've got my home office on top of my barn. You see, all the hay is actually outside, believe it or not. And so I've got 62 acres and doing sustainable agriculture. One of the people on the board of our organization is a guy named Justin Knopf, who is the farmer in the documentary Farmer, Rancher, Fisherman.
Yes, sir.
So you may have, if you haven't heard of him, you ought to check that out and watch that. But so it's something near and dear to my heart. I grew up in Kansas. I'm kind of a Kansan that moved to the East Coast to become a wheat farmer. So I get ribbed by all my Kansas friends. But so it's really just exciting to be able to talk to you and learn some about what you're doing. So maybe you could just tell our listeners just more about the Noble Research Institute and the work you're up to.
Okay. Well, the Noble Research Institute's been here since 1945 with the sole purpose of helping farmers and ranchers and hoping to keep them on the land while improving the soils. And so over the period of time, that's what our focus has been, going into doing things such as research that for the most part have been very much applied. You go back and look in time, the small grains winter pasture grazing that occurs here in the Southern Plains originated here at Noble through the use of cereal rye called Elbon, E-L-B-O-N, which is just Noble spelled backwards. It really helped convert a lot of our wore out wheat country and turn it into grazing country for growing stockers. And that is part of where we started back in the 1950s. And with that evolved a consultation effort. Our research continued to evolve to the point today we've got in the neighborhood of 14,000 acres of land, all of which is under regenerative management today with a focus centered around research. How do we help producers transition from whatever type of management they may have been so that we're focused on soil health and really land stewardship for improved soil health in grazing animal production for lasting producer profitability. That's our theme. That's our focus today on all our efforts. And we're excited about having that as an opportunity to really focus on it solely, because historically we've been there to help all producers here in the Southern Great Plains. But that was the caveat. We were small. We were very regionally focused. Long term, what we want to do is have more of a national presence in this, what we call regenerative ranching, as we go forward from today. So we're at a time of transition, but we're also excited about the fact that we have an opportunity to not only change land, but change lives as well.
Well, that's fascinating. Well, you tell us more about your personal story. How did you get involved in this work?
Well, roundabout way, I ended up with a couple of degrees at A&M. One of them was in range management, was focused on grazing management in particular. Following some of the work and concerns that people had with the savory grazing system, and I was fortunate to have an advisor that said, look, your first assignment is to read the book Holistic Resource Management, and so take a look at it. There's a lot of truisms in it. See how it could apply to the research you were doing. And with that, it evolved to when I started running a ranch and managed a ranch outside of College Station in East Texas for about 10 years. And doing that, we did a lot of rotational grazing, following a lot of the principles that were guiding folks through that holistic mindset. And then had the opportunity to come up here as a pasture and range consultant in 1995. So I've been here since 1995. As I said, as a pasture and range consultant, still do that, mainly focused on some of the more higher stock density type of grazing efforts, but also have been a consulting team manager, and now I'm director over the consultants and the ranches themselves.
So Hugh, one of the things we work on is, we're engaging kind of a center-right audience. There's our theory is, look, there are millions and millions of people who, when they hear about environmentalism, They get defensive because of how it's been politicized.
Yes,
But the people that I grew up with who are predominantly, of a certain ideological persuasion, they care very deeply about sustainability. It's the old Boy Scout motto of, do you believe in leaving the campsite better off than you found it? There are very few people I grew up with who would disagree with that.
correct.
And there's a lot of excitement, kind of under curiosity about what these terms regenerative agriculture mean. And so you and I think I intuitively understand that, but what's an example of non-regenerative agriculture? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? And what is Noble trying to work to correct, so people can understand what the non-regenerative situation looks like and why it needs to.
And I think that's where we here at Noble, one of the things we've tried to avoid is not trying to put a divide in there, be divisive as to what is and what isn't, until you understand what the processes are that we're trying to work within, and what are the principles we're trying to guide our practices through. Typically, most people, when you start putting a label on them as regenerative or sustainable or conventional or traditional, people take offense to it. And we've learned that the hard way.
Right.
So instead of saying regenerative land stewardship, we're sitting there saying land stewardship for improved soil health. And nobody's going to disagree with that. And I think that's what we've got to look at. For us, it's healthy soils and profitability. Those are the two focuses that we want. We want it sustainability to mean, as well as regenerative ranching. So when we begin to look at what it does and what it doesn't look like, I think one of the things that we try to guide people, if you're doing management practices without understanding how you affect the 4 ecosystem processes and how you can enhance your soils, your ecology, your entire ranch operation, your ecosystem, by managing toward those what we call the 6 soil health principles, then you probably aren't as regenerative as you could be.
Right.
And I think that's the first step, is making sure there's always a continuum, and you never cross a line to say that, okay, I stepped over it, now I'm regenerative. I've got it done. So we really want to caution people to let people know, it's just a change in mindset. It's a change of thought process, and we don't want to get caught up in just doing management practices because we think this is what best management practices should be, when in essence, it's still got to be a dynamic where the manager is still in charge in the decision-making process.
Yeah. That's a great point. So I'll talk some about my experience, but I'm curious to, maybe you could describe more, what does that mindset mean to you? What are some of those principles?
Okay. Well, the mindset in itself is beginning to look at the 4 ecosystem processes. And those 4 ecosystem processes, of course, is the energy flow, the water cycle, the nutrient cycle, as well as community dynamics. And most people really don't understand the word community dynamics, but it really means looking at the entire ecosystem, looking at your plants, your organisms, your livestock, and you as an individual. How do you interact in order to improve the other 3 ecosystem processes? And in doing so, we want to make sure that we're paying a lot of attention to how we're applying practices so that we continue to focus around those soil health principles, which is, number one, understanding your context, knowing what it is that your soils are capable of doing. Most people kind of know what our history is in the short term, but not very many people can go back to pre-civilization and say, what did this environment look like? Over time, our landscapes are going to change, but we've changed them a whole lot in just the last few decades. So what did it look like pre-civilization? What was the productive capacity? Not that we're ever going to return to pre-civilization, but it gives you an understanding of the dynamics and the abundance of ecology within the soils and the landscapes themselves. So understanding the context. Second thing we want to look at is keeping the soils covered, making sure that we have a good soil cover at all times. So we've got water and rainfall that can infiltrate into the soil and be stored in the soil as opposed to running off. And then we go right into maintaining plant diversity, making sure we have plenty of plants, whether they be forbs, grasses, trees, whatever should naturally be within those landscapes, with as much diversity as possible. In addition to that, we want to make sure we keep a living root on the ground all the time, which typically means You have perennials, but not only just perennials, but you want the annuals to fill in all the gaps that the perennials don't occupy. So we have as much diversity in there as possible. And then you want to make sure that you include livestock. With the livestock, integrate the livestock properly. So understanding the difference between carrying capacity and stocking rate, being sure that you have enough forage to run the animals that you're trying to carry, and know that carrying capacity changes from year to year, season to season. How do you manage such that you always have a reserve and you have an abundance of forage, as opposed to, as we see in this time of year when people are suffering from drought, maybe not near enough, but being able to make those adjustments so that the landscape, the ecology, the soils are never harmed. And I've left out one, and I don't have it in front of me to tell you what it was.
Okay. That's all right. Well, maybe be able to come to you this way. Describe some. So as you've applied this work, maybe you could tell one or two success stories of just people that come to mind where it just clicked, like a person put all these pieces together and what.
Yes, sir. Well, we do have several people that we've worked with over the years that, for the most part, have either been bent toward the regenerative side, or have been involved in holistic resource management, where they're looking at the bigger picture and not just livestock production. I think that's where people get caught up, is just focusing on production, as opposed to what's the balance that needs to be created between all those elements. But one of the success stories is Destiny Ranch. Some folks out here northeast of us that bought a 900-acre property. When they bought it, they called us to come out and take a look at it. And I'm a pasture and range consultant. I went out there during the middle of the winter time. They had just bought it. People had grazed everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could not identify a plant that was there. They had grazed it that hard. And they asked me, so what do you want? What do you think we need to do? And I said, the best thing you could do is just give it a year's rest and see what's going to grow. Yeah. The soils were good, and I could tell them that, but I couldn't tell them what was going to grow up this next spring. So that's what they did. So given the plant, the property enough rest so they could begin to manage a cattle operation was the first step. Then the next piece of it is they begin to look at it and say, okay, I've got these flat areas that have native range. I've got some of these other areas over here that's a mix between native and fescue. I've got some Bermuda grass and fescue. Begin to operate those separately, and then begin to lay in the water system such that they could have water distributed to where they can graze it more appropriately. So over a period of time, they went from about 10, 12 really good pastures, bigger pastures, started breaking them down into smaller and smaller units, to where over about a 4-year period, they were managing livestock mostly with temporary fences, with a few key electric fences, so that they could manage their grazing on a daily basis. And when they did that, the whole operation moved from a productive stage that I would have called in fair to good condition, to where most of it was in excellent condition. And what that means is about a double in carrying capacity. Wow. Over what they had when they first started. Wow. That makes a big difference. But it started with doing what the land needed, providing the rest and recovery after every event, starting off with a long rest and recovery the first growing season.
Well, and what are some of the challenges that you face as you're trying to help people adopt this? I guess one as you described, even that success story, is oftentimes, it's hard for anybody that's doing ag or ranching to have an off year, because you don't have enough resources. So how do you help people get over that hump where they can give the land time to rest, and then get to a more sustainable, long-term profitable model? Maybe that's the challenge. Maybe there are other challenges that
there's other challenges. And, another example, and I'll use another individual, that they had an operation, but what they realized is they were putting a lot of money into the operational inputs, fertilizer, chemicals. And they were looking at it saying, the margins were getting smaller and smaller, and it made it more and more difficult in order to operate. They also had 3 employees. And when they really began to see how they could manage more effectively, they just asked the question, what if I cut out the big inputs? Because if you're going to make a big impact on your economic side of it, you got to look at those areas that are going to be the biggest outlays of cash, which for them, it was fertilizer, chemicals, and people and equipment. Mm-hmm. So they went back there and said what it would look like if we streamlined our activities. They had a person that had an opportunity to go somewhere else, and it was to his benefit. So it wasn't like he was terminated. They said, well, if we're going to operate with 2 people, how do we operate them? And then cut all this, cut everything that's extra out. And then let's reduce our stocking rate a little bit. And then what would that do to the margins? Well, they did all this prior to the previous drought, 2011, 2012. And they started measuring their carrying capacity, their forage from the spring, and then they destocked according to what the forage was predicted, or they predicted would grow for the rest of the season during the early part of the spring. And then it got to 2012, 2013, 2011, 2012, 2013 were the most profitable years that ranch had ever had.
Wow.
And it's not just those, but others, when they were paying attention to the cost, addressing those issues, cutting back down, combining herds to where they had one herd. So you didn't need as many people moving them. You didn't need all the equipment all of a sudden. They got down to the point where they were more focused on the land and the ecology, managing such that 1-2 people could do it easily.
Yeah.
And that's where how it all needs to begin. So if you know your cost, that's a great place to start. Do you really know your economics before you get to the end of the year? And most people, most ranchers that I've had the fortunate position to be in, when they came to us, they didn't.
Right.
If they can begin to look at that to where they've got good enough records to understand what the direct cost relative to the enterprises that they have, understand what their overhead costs are, and then how do you begin to address those big ticket items so that you can still increase your margin and have profitability as opposed to just looking at gross product and gross sales.
Yeah, and in my small operation here, a lot of people in my situation, they'll just lease their land but I actively manage it. So I hire a farmer that has the equipment, but I pay the input costs. So I see what happens when fertilizer goes. It's just through the roof. And it's just folks don't have any idea of how integrated agriculture is to international economics and how farmers and ranchers have to be biologists. They've got to be economists. They've got to be fund man. They have to understand a lot of different things now, and not just the physical ecosystem, but our financial ecosystem as well.
Well, and part of that too, I know it wasn't the intent, but if you look at what our extension system is focused on in the past, is trying to give producers answers. Let's make it simple. Let's make it easy. And when input costs were inexpensive, it made sense. And as a result, I think we've grown a population of producers that are more focused on the practices and the protocols of what they've done from year to year because it worked. If they wanted more production, they could add more fertilizer, but fertilizer isn't cheap anymore. The management practices, the inputs that go along with it are more costly. How do you pull that out and begin to better understand on how to manage our cattle, our livestock, our lands such that we don't have that dependence on a lot of these inputs that we've been able to afford over the last few decades. We're just not able to do that anymore.
Yeah, and what do you see as some of the challenges facing the growth of regenerative agriculture broadly, soil management? Do you see is this a policy challenge? Is it other things? What can be done to help expand?
Yes, sir. You're asking on the policy side. There's probably could be, but unfortunately, policy oftentimes comes with protocols that are very restrictive.
Right.
And that's a challenge. Yes, you want to encourage soil health management. You want to encourage sustainability, but when you start putting protocols where it restricts the management capabilities of the producer, and these really good producers, they don't need it. And oftentimes they don't need the policies. Yeah. They're already ahead. But to help,
they already want to do that. They want to do the right thing.
They want to do the right thing. Yeah. It's helping those people get over the hump. What does it take to get people over the hump into managing more regeneratively is the real question. What is it going to take? And I think part of that is just a better understanding of the cause and effect of what they have out there, being able to identify what the root cause of a lot of the issues that might be within an operation, and being able to work proactively instead of reactively, and, as they begin to identify these, those issues. Part of that, I think we've got to get beyond thinking we've got to look like the neighbors look like.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to be able to be bold enough to kind of set our own direction and try some things that heretofore we might not have tried, and realize as we move into this regenerative approach, you don't have to turn, if you've got, say you've got several hundred acres, you don't have to start with all several hundred.
Yeah.
Do what you can do well.
Right.
Take the area that you can pay the most attention to, the one that'll give you the biggest return for your effort, which is always your best lands.
Yeah.
Start with that during a period of time when you can commit to it.
Yeah.
And that's that, figure out what's going to work for you, because it's going to look different for everybody. You've got to realize that being independent, your goals are different than your neighbors, but you got to be bold enough to start it and try it and adapt without giving up. But it all starts. Do you have your stocking rate, appropriate to your carrying capacity? Do you even know what your carrying capacity is? What is your annual production? What's the flow of the forages that you have? And then how can you utilize your existing resources to the best of their ability first before I start making changes?
Well, since I've got you as an active or captive person here, expert. So one of the pieces of advice I got actually from my friend Justin, who's the farmer in Kansas, he said, John, you ought to look into having meat goats, because I've got a mid-Atlantic farm. So my farm is big compared to the average size in my part of the country, but it's tiny compared to the farms in Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas. So I've got 62 acres, but a lot of my friends have thousands of acres, where you can make these decisions about moving around cattle on hundreds of acres.
Right.
But it's a very different situation but what you can do, just people listening from all over the country, is if you have a smaller piece of land, you can do goats, you can do sheep. There's other things you can do to incorporate these practices. Do you work with other forms of livestock, or primarily just cattle?
Well, we primarily with cattle, because that's what most of the producers want to work with. The reality of it is the sheep and goats can be a lot more profitable in most cases. And that's for example, we just introduced sheep and goats to our properties over the last couple of years. The little hair sheep that we have, we brought those in 2 years ago. They were bred, they lambed. We kept the ewe lambs, just sold the males, and after 2 years, we've got the ewes paid off. Now, how many cows are you going to pay off in 2 years? You don't.
Yeah.
Same thing. We're in the process of bringing in a bunch of nannies. They didn't have the same percentage, because there's a lot of young ones within the group that the ewes did, but we'll be able to pay off our goats between 2 and 3 years. Just and doing the same thing, keeping the females and selling the males. But it's all back to the smaller units. You can probably do really, really well, because there is a big demand for sheep and goat meat. And if you're over in the East, you probably got even a higher demand than what we have here in the Midwest, because we still got to get them shipped somewhere to the East Coast or West Coast, but mostly to the East Coast. So you're looking at an opportunity, and you can run more of those. You just don't get the same herd effect at times that you would have with cattle, but you don't need that many cattle. And the other thing, for every cow that you can run, let's say, a full grown cow, you can run a sheep or a goat, depending on what how much browse or how many forbs that you naturally have within your system, without affecting your stocking rate. It's a complementary grazing that could occur. So at least ought to consider putting them together. And then, especially on these smaller units, maybe you only need to have the cattle in there for a short period of time every couple of years to sort of reset the forage if it begins to get ahead of you. So there's plenty of opportunities, whether you're running meat goats or browse goats or hair sheep or any other type of sheep. There is a lot of opportunity. Now you got to do your homework and realize that the key thing, you got to keep them alive, and they're not quite as it takes a little more management and a little more attention to them. You can't just turn them out like you do a cow, and maybe you see them here after a while, and they're on their own as long as they've got plenty to eat. the sheep and goats require a little of attention, and part of that is you got to be able to keep them healthy, and you got to keep the predator issues at bay.
Right. Yeah. I mean, some of the advice we got from folks out here is, start small. Like we just have 2 fainting goats, myotonic goats.
Yes.
And so I don't want to scare my kids because we're not going to eat our goats. The goats really are, the way I describe it is they're training for us. The goats are teaching us about what it is to manage an ecosystem, what it is to every day keep an animal alive, have the right, safety and feed and all that. And we have a lot of invasive species, and that's, we're dealing with Johnson grass, we're dealing with, the consequences of the emerald ash borer and all the invasive, the lack of understory in a lot of the wooded areas. So,
and I think that the small ruminants really do give you an opportunity to have a better idea of what the ecology would, how to complement the ecology through your grazing management. And they're smaller, especially if you got young family members, you're less likely to get anybody hurt with them,
Right.
and that's also important for those of us got, I don't have young kids, but I got young grandkids.
Mhm.
And you want to make sure that they have the opportunity to feel safe and secure and understand what's going on out there.
Right.
You want them to understand what the dynamics within the ecosystem, and that the animal is just part of it. Because you're not just feeding the animal that you see, you're feeding a lot of animals you don't normally see. And that's where, a lot of the cattlemen that I've worked with, they know that there's other organisms. They don't realize how much forage has to get back to the organisms you don't see, back to the land, the organisms
Right.
that live along the surface and in the soil.
Mhm.
Those are the ones you've got to should provide about half your forage to, and you've got to be thinking, what do they need?
Right.
And the neat other thing about having the sheep and goats is they typically graze a greater diversity of forages than what the cattle do. And in doing so, you end up with a little better natural nutrient cycling occurring because you've got other ruminants, whether you have cattle or not.
Right. Well, as I expand the operation, I'll have to hit you up for more advice if you don't mind.
Well, and if I don't know it, I've got some people that do.
I bet you
people
do.
here that I'm learning from the sheep and goats, because I didn't grow up with sheep and goats. It's fun.
Well, is there anything I haven't asked about that you think people ought to know about this field that, no pun intended, that's important?
I think the first thing is that when they need to come to mind is that they don't need to tackle it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Come in with an open mind, try it, talk with some other producers that have had some successes, build upon early successes. And it's not that much different than what they're already doing in most cases. If land stewardship for improved soil health is important to you, you probably have already been trying to do some of the things that we would recommend anyhow. But don't take offense to a name, to a label.
Right.
We're just trying to improve the land and improve profitability. So be observant. I'm trying to think of the right word. Observative. Is that even a word?
Observant. Yeah.
I'm really good at making up words. And
That's a good one.
That's a good one. Yeah. But be observant, as well as know the cause and effect. Make notes, journal, as well as know your economics.
That's great.
Maintain your enterprise economics. Be sure that you're looking at those not only monthly, but quarterly, long before it comes time to make those Schedule Fs at the end of the year. Because at that point, it's too late. You can't do anything about it.
That's right. Well, Hugh, thank you so much for taking the time. Again, I'm John Hart. This has been Tech Voices with C3 Solutions. You can follow us at c3newsmag.com. And Hugh Aljoe, he's the Director of Producer Relations with the Noble Research Institute. And would love to have you out to the farm here. Would love to visit you all. And we'll look forward to doing this again. One other thing.
If they want more information, if they visit our website at www.noble.org and sign up for our Noble Rancher. Our Noble Rancher is our weekly publication, e-newsletter that comes out. Be great information that they can read up more about regenerative ranching and what's going on here at Noble.
Terrific. Well, we'll post that. I'll make sure I'm on that as well. So
thank you.
Of course, to stay in touch. Well, thank you, sir. And we'll look forward to having another conversation.
We'll look forward to it. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Steve. Bye-bye.